Alright, so going on to episode 3, it seems like I got myself hyped after the second part of the second episode, and then I end up getting here what I was asking for the past couple of times, which is more development into Gloria's character. And I guess I wasn't quite sure what I was asking for or what I was expecting, but this we got a whole episode of her now. To kind of give us much more of an insight on where her character may or may not be going, or maybe it doesn't. This is certainly an interesting episode because last night, I was also extremely tired last night, but what I could basically gather was this isn't a whole lot of anything, is it? So I slept on it, and now I'm pretty much exactly here. And so, having thought about it and slept on it, it's kind of... Well, one thing it seemed like immediately, which makes a whole lot of sense if it feels like nothing's progressing, is obviously Gloria is leaving and she goes to Hollywood, which feels very similar to in the original movie when Marge left to go meet Mike Yanagita in Minneapolis while she was investigating. And of course, naturally, that scene is known for... It seemed totally pointless when it first happened. Good as the scene is, of course, as a standalone, but in regards to the big picture, it just seemed very... its own thing, not related to anything. But of course, there's still some people that still haven't quite put together the whole... basically, all it came down to was that entire scene was linking Mike's lies to Jerry's. The end. But it still gave us, it still gave the writers time to kind of... The writers being the Coen brothers, obviously. They were able to use Mike and just make a whole new memorable character and this whole new memorable scene, which, like I said, could just be its own standalone thing. And if it's rich enough, it doesn't necessarily matter how much it connects to the overall story, as long as it does at least a little bit, as it does, and ends up being quite crucial. This episode could be that. Obviously, we don't know yet. Or it could just be... Or it just could be a character development episode, because that's one thing that a lot of people bring up, that a lot of people are much more attached to series these days than movies, it seems, and a lot of it has to do with a series has time to kind of build characters without having to necessarily go do their own thing. Like, this could literally just be a 1-hour episode about nothing more than adding to the characters, and maybe not necessarily the story itself. That could be as well. And yeah, it does give us a lot more, and of course we do get, we're getting Enos's backstory now, where he's played by Thomas Mann. And we're getting the whole backstory on this, how he came to be who he was, and who he is now, and where he got this new name from. Which you have to wait till the entire episode to find out. And it's quite unceremonious when it happens. It's really just a matter of... This is one of those episodes where it's really hard to judge without knowing what's ahead. But even then, you know, the Coen brothers certainly had a way when they make their movies, which obviously, all of which are being borrowed from here. The Barton Fink reference with the bell it comes to mind. I think her sitting on the beach was probably a kind of a Barton Fink ode as well. But how they can do these things where, like I was saying, not everything has to necessarily be directly there, as long as it, you know, works in some artistic form and evokes something. And it's just entertaining in one way or another, but still, you do kind of... It does get a little frustrating when you're kind of trying to wonder what the point of it all is. Because there's really not... Because I feel like I would have been more on board with this episode, not just because my favorite characters in this season so far weren't in it, but also, it needed to be maybe more well done than it was. Because we did get some characters in here, some of which have a point, some of which don't, at least for now. like Ray Wise being on the plane and then just re-popping up, like the kind of like the old woman in Beavis and Butthead Do America. He just wherever she goes, he just happens to be there, and just talk. What he says may have bearing on something. It's hard to tell. The scene that stuck out most, that maybe at least kind of tried to almost like it was trying to explore the themes or whatever, was when she came across Zimmerman, old man Zimmerman, who in his younger days we see in the flashbacks was obviously, I cannot remember his name, but it's the dude that Stuart's wife was cheating with in A Serious Man. And the waitress that was Frances Fisher, who her younger self was played by her daughter with Clint Eastwood. And the thing here was, there was really, the reason it kind of felt pointless was because after we saw them in present day, we kind of realized that no matter how dark the situation gets in the flashbacks, we know everybody gets out of it. So if there was supposed to be any kind of suspense or anything, that wasn't really there, and it all just kind of seemed quite anticlimactic, like it was really building to something, but no, he just kind of almost beat him to death. But they're obviously Enos is no longer with us, but they all got out of this situation alive. So there's really not a whole lot left open, at least from what's in front of us now. It's basically all got to be speculation after this episode. But going on that, there's also the animation sequences. I know some people like when that's brought into stuff, kind of like the animated sequences in Deathly Hallows 1 or whatever. I think Krampus is a recent example where they just put these animated stories within a live action story that may or may not be related to anything, or may just be symbolic or whatever. It's very Don Hertzfeldt like World of Tomorrow that he just made. But I don't know, it all just kind of felt, maybe, I don't know if it's necessarily that it's too vague, but I don't know, just something was. And then there was another moment where, usually, despite all this ambiguity, this is just a tiny nitpick, and I don't even know if it's really too much of a problem, but it just kind of felt like a certain, it's something else. But when she went to Zimmerman's place, and we know, because this show is not all about necessarily spelling it all out. I mean, if you look at the fucking UFO thing from the last season, they don't feel that they necessarily have to spell everything out, which is what most people like. But then you just have those little moments where it's like, for really no reason at all other than I think for the sake of the audience, when she goes to see old man Zimmerman, there is a picture of him outside of his room where he looked exactly as he does in the flashbacks. And it's almost like, it seems like a distrust in the audience to get what's going on. So I felt like that was kind of, that kind of put me off a little bit in regards to, do they want to be really ambiguous and make us all figure it out, or are they trying to go easy on us and spell a lot of things out? There was kind of not a good balance of that. And then going into basically for the whole thing, it's kind of, is it all just kind of like a normal procedural type thing, or is this all leading to something? And apart from her learning how he got his alias, the only other thing we figure out at the very, very last minute, right before it ends, is now she knows Scoot McNairy's involvement in this, or at least that he was involved in it, and now she has a direction to go. But it took a whole episode of her getting nowhere to get to that point. And it's something that we as an audience obviously already know, because that's what the whole first episode was. So yeah, I can see this is definitely an episode that will be taken in a number of, probably almost everybody that watches this will take this episode in a different direction, all their own. But I did feel that it was kind of, there was another new character. And that's the thing too, is these characters more than likely probably won't have a lot to do with anything in the long run. Like, maybe Ray Wise said, like, one sentence that'll, like, come back later or something. Or her conversation with Zimmerman, maybe. But, for the most part, we get characters like the cop. Where it's like, I don't know what he was supposed to add to this, or if it was just the whole, to really contrast with where Gloria comes from and what it's like here in these types of people. Like, the whole Facebook conversation wasn't working for me, and the, had basically just flat out saying, he tells her he's gonna go take a shit, and it's just, I don't understand, like, this, like, I understand it if it's like a Mike Yanagita type, where it's like, he may seem like he doesn't have a whole lot of purpose despite getting a whole giant portion of the movie to himself. But the character was at least interesting, or at least that scene is entertaining because it's so hard to watch, because of the way his character is and the way Marge is reacting to him. But I can't really see this thing with the cop being anything that's anything we have to worry about, or that really needed to be there in the first place. But I don't know. But once again, this is one of those episodes also that is so open that down the road it could be like this whole episode could be a whole barrage of clues to things that we don't know about yet. And we could, once we get to the very end of this season, maybe this episode will be like, oh my god, this episode was a goldmine all along, and we'll have to go back to it and put this all together. But in the meantime, when we don't know much of anything, and we're missing all the characters that I think have so far made this season great, it's kind of hard to latch on to. But there are certain things kind of in here, like that creepy box, where you flip the switch and the little hand comes out, and it's just this endless thing. I'm pretty positive we have seen that box before, but my mind isn't going there, but, or finding it. But yeah, it did feel like there was some stuff laid out that could potentially mean something later, but... Or it could just, it could go the opposite way too. We could get all the way to the end of the season and realize this episode was totally pointless, and that might make it look worse. It's really hard to say, but it is nice that we finally got some time with Gloria's character, and to kind of see how she's able to do this. It does feel... Well, it's not necessarily her performance, it's more like the way the character's written and the situations she's put in do feel... As I was talking about, I think in the first episode, there's always that fear that they're just gonna kind of copy and paste Marge Gunderson and just kind of not add a whole lot to it, and just kind of make these cop characters kind of the same, kind of like, you know, Patrick Wilson and Colin Hanks and Allison Tolman and all the other cops we've seen in this show, just the whole thing. And how none of them really, you know, break out as their own character as much as the characters around them. And certainly not in the way that Marge was a unique character, which is becoming less and less because these characters are becoming more and more like her as they go. But so yeah, I don't know. I just don't know. There's a lot I would like to speculate on, but that's kind of another problem too, is I don't really feel like the episode gave us enough to latch onto to, you know, kind of keep us interested enough to want to know where these things go, or what they mean, or if they're going to mean anything at all, and if we're okay with the episode as it is, if they end up not. So, yeah, I wish, like, as soon as the episode was over, I was freaking out, because it was like, what do I even say in a video about this episode? I'm like, I was afraid I'd have absolutely nothing to say, and you may still think that's the case, but, I don't know, it's certainly enough to where, obviously we're all gonna keep going, but there's really, to me anyway, I don't feel like they really left us enough. Despite being as vague as possible, they still haven't quite left us with enough to chew on to really be like, oh, where's this stuff gonna go? Because, well, the only thing we have to go on is what we assumed she was gonna find out in the first place, which is Scoob McNairy's involvement. So, yeah, I guess we'll see. This episode's gonna be up in the air until some pieces are put together, but... Yeah, before this gets too repetitive, which I think it might have already, I think that's about it for this one. So yeah, we'll see what happens when, you know, McGregor's character comes back, and David Thewlis and Michael Stuhlbarg and all of them that really got me hyped for where this story was going. Maybe we just hit a road bump, or maybe we didn't. But it'll be interesting to find out which one of those we lie on. So in the meantime, I'll be doing, I don't even know if the viewership for these videos is the same, but for what it's worth, you should be getting a Guardians of the Galaxy review tomorrow, and an interesting, if dated, versus on Sunday. So we'll see how that goes. But in the meantime, yeah, that's it.